Alright guys, so I'm going to be showing you how to clean your brushes today. This is how I do it. I use acrylic and oil paint as well. So I'll show you the differences and similarities between those, and I'll show you how to clean them, but as well I will also show you guys how to save them. Now if they're old and dried out, you don't necessarily have to toss them. You can reshape them and bring them back to life, and I'll show you guys how to do that, as well as the oil paint I have and acrylic paint, how I store them, and what I find to be the best way. So let's get to it. So I'll show you the oil setup I have. I don't have too much because I just started in last December, but so these are the brushes I have, and I'll compare them to the acrylic brushes. I've been using acrylic for 6-7 years maybe, so these are lots of brushes I've accumulated over time. Some are fairly new, some are pretty old and haggard. Alright, so for storing the paint, I recently found out about this with the oil paint, where it's a great tip. I noticed I would store them straight up like this, cap side up, and when I would go to use them and I'd put a bit on my palette, I would have oil that would come out first. So if you store it the opposite way, have cap side down, apparently it'll prevent that oil separation from happening. So I just started doing that. Okay, and so what I use to clean my oil brushes while I'm painting is I have this little tight seal jar. Now this is an old, I think it was for instant yeast. So you can use whatever you have lying around the house, or you can buy one of those jars from art stores, sell them, and they'll have this type of mesh or like a coil at the bottom. In this jar, you want to fill it. Some people use turpentine. What I've used is mineral spirits. You want to brush it against that coil or whatever the metal that you're using, and that'll help get the oil off. What I use on the inside to brush my brushes against is actually one of those hair catchers that you put in your shower drain. So I just clip the edges myself so they're kind of haggard, but it works great, and it was free. Something you will notice as well too is when you use this in your jar and you set it down overnight, or however long you take breaks in between, you'll see that the paint will actually settle to the bottom and it will separate. Use a paper towel or an old rag. Get as much of the color off as you can. What I have is this Masters brush cleaner. I got this from Michael's. Now this works with oil paint, acrylic paint, and watercolor, it says on it. So here I have an acrylic brush and an oil brush. So you want to rinse them first, and take your brush cleaner. And with your wet brush, you just want to kind of stir it around and get the soap to lather. Really work it into those bristles. So you want it to build up and look like that. Now if it's not really lathering up for you, just wet it more and you can see it's really starting to lather up. Now after you have that, what I do, I just kind of brush it around in my hand, swirl it, and introduce some water, and you can get that soap working. I use hot water, pretty much as hot as I can stand. Just rinse it well. Same thing with the oil brush. Now one thing with the oil brushes is you really want to make sure before you're washing them to wipe off as much color as you can. Just because that oil paint it's not good for your plumbing, so be sure to wipe off as much as you can before you wash it. The acrylic paint is a little more forgiving. Yeah, and then just rinse them. Get a clean towel. It can be your designated paintbrush towel. Just dry it off. Make sure you get the handles nice and dry and the bristles nice and dry. And then you can store them and let them sit upright to dry. The next thing I'll show you is how to save your brushes. So this is a super old acrylic brush that I have. You can see how frayed and like fanned out those hairs are. Now a tip for this, what you can do is you can just get some plain soap, lather it up in the bristles, and you just want to form it with your hand to kind of pull them back together. And you can let that sit overnight or for a few hours. And then once that time has passed, just rinse it, get all that soap out, and then form it again with your hands and have it sit upright to dry, and it should go back to normal. For the oil brushes, another tip you can do is after you've cleaned them, you can actually dip them in some linseed oil, and then similar to the soap, once it's in the hairs, you want to form it into whatever shape you want. I just do it with my hands. I know people do it with tin foil, for example, to really hold it tight, and that'll save the shape. And a great tip when you're using acrylic with the brushes is when you go to clean them, just use normal water, but do not leave your brushes sitting in the water. So rinse them and then wipe them off, and then go clean them with the soap and let them dry. You do not want to let them sit in your jar or your cup just for days, because the ferrule, which is this metal part right here, it's usually just held on with some pretty weak glue, to be honest. So over time that water is going to break down that glue, and you'll see, like on this brush here, I can actually slide it up and down and eventually off. I went through my brushes and quite a few of them are actually like this. Just over time, years, it breaks down. You can see the glue left on there. It's worn away in some parts. But once it's like this, you can re-glue it, or depending on how old and damaged the hairs are on your brush, it may not even be worth it for the cost to try to save it. It's just garbage. Chuck it. Put all my acrylic stuff together, so I got a mix of some bigger things of paint. I got some acrylic mediums, and I store them just laying down. I can stack them. I haven't used them in quite a while, but I try to have them grouped by color, so it's a little bit easier to dig through and find what I'm looking for. But it's just a good way to keep them all together. And I have two types, so I use Golden Paints is the brand. So the open acrylics, which are the black ones, and the white ones are the normal line that they have. It's a lot thicker. If by chance they do leak or something, it's in a big Tupperware type container, so it's not a big deal. Okay, it's all done, guys, so hopefully you find use of how I clean and I store my brushes and paints as well. So let's get to it. Stay creative.